Now, Ukrainian President Zelensky has fired one of his top aides after her house was raided by anti-corruption authorities. That comes after the ousted defence minister, Mykhailo Fedorov, launched an attack on Zelensky and called for a presidential election. Let's speak first to David Marples, an expert in Ukrainian politics and Professor of Eastern European History at the University of Alberta in Canada. David, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
It's good to speak to you. Let's consider, first of all, how Zelensky is dealing with these political crises. We've talked about his challenges around corruption and tackling corruption before, so that's a problem that persists. And then he's had this broadside from Fedorov saying now's the time for an election, in what some may say sounded a lot like a presidential campaign launch from the former defence minister.
Yeah, I mean, there have been public demonstrations for some time since Fedorov was fired. And he's sort of using these to build up what seems like a potential election campaign if there would be an election. But the fact is, it's unrealistic at the present time to think about Ukraine having an election because the problems will be astronomical. For one thing, many citizens have left their homes, others are under occupation, and missiles are raining down on Kiev and Kharkiv and other cities. It's almost impossible to have a proper election campaign at this time. And Zelensky's response, which I believe just came out, said it was unrealistic to have an election at this time, as long as Ukraine is under martial law. And that has always been the rule, that you can't have an election during a war. And that was the case, of course, for the UK in the Second World War. There was no election between 1939 and 1945. So it has precedence, and it's not unusual, and I think it couldn't be expected. And I think Fedorov is really speaking out of line. I don't think that's even a possibility.
Is there a sense, though, that because of the demonstrations you mentioned, and because of the high-profile nature of his dismissal, and because of his ability to command an audience, that actually he could agitate in the direction of an election for quite some time, and there could be a real feeling of momentum behind his call that builds over these weeks, months, who knows how long, but actually he could become a figurehead for, democracy even during a time of war?
He could. It's conceivable. It's unfortunate, I think, for Ukraine that he's gone this far. But I think really it's not likely that he would himself be the chosen candidate if there was an election today. He's well behind in the opinion polls. Zelensky's also behind, actually. The most popular candidates seem to be military generals, past military generals for the most part, rather than people in the civilian structures. So although he could be a candidate, I don't think it's likely that he would be winning, even though he has the momentum of this popular campaign to reinstate him as defense minister. Zelensky has now appointed a new defense minister, Yevgeny Mara, who was formerly the head of the security service since the beginning of 2026. So this guy seems to me to be a fairly stable choice, someone who is not likely to arouse a lot of opposition in the future. So I think Zelensky is dealing with it, but I agree that the constant corruption scandals that are coming up in his office do weaken him significantly and undermine his presidency.
Yeah. David, it's good to speak to you about these things. Thank you very much indeed. David Marples from the University of Alberta. Let's bring in Lesia Vasylenko, a Ukrainian MP in the opposition Holos party. Lesia, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks
so much for joining us. How do you respond to the call from former Defence Minister Fedorov? Is he right to call for an election?
To be honest, an election in Ukraine is long overdue. I am a member of parliament elected in 2019. I was supposed to be elected for 5 years. 29th of August will be 7 years since I'm in parliament. But we also all understand that Ukraine, since 2022, is operating under martial law. And as many countries across the world, martial law means that there can be no elections. This is something that is written into our constitution, and that is the same as in many fundamental legislation acts and constitutions across the world. there's a good reason for that. And just previously, the expert you had online, he just stated just a few reasons why elections cannot be held during martial law. First of all, a large chunk of the population will not be able to vote. I'm talking about the soldiers, the men and women who are serving at this point on the front line, defending their countries, and who possibly have the biggest right to decide who is going to run the country today and tomorrow.
Yeah. So for clarity, Lesia, you're saying, yes, an election is overdue, but now is not the time to have one.
It's unrealistic. It would require a constitutional change.
Yeah.
A constitutional change is difficult enough process to orchestrate at peacetime, and during the martial law regime, it's virtually impossible. So although sentimentally people are very much ready for the election, both those who are in government in power and those voters who are electing those who are in power, but we are all aware that, first of all, we need to fight off the enemy. We need to stop the drones and missiles flying every single night and hitting targets in Kyiv, Lviv, and all the cities across Ukraine. And then we can talk about politics and elections.
Yeah, understood. Lesia, thank you very much. It's good to speak to you.
Thank you.
That's Lesia Vasylenko, Ukrainian MP in the opposition Holos Party.
Mykhailo Fedorov, the Ukrainian former defence secretary who was sacked by Volodymyr Zelensky last month, has called for elections in the war-torn country. Fedorov said in a video message posted to YouTube that democracy cannot be held hostage by Russia. The Ukrainian president hasn't yet responded, but has previously ruled out votes until necessary security guarantees are in place. Ukraine has been under martial law with suspended elections since Russia's full-scale invasion. But could this be the biggest challenge to Zelensky's authority since the war began? Let's speak to Yevgenia Kravchuk, Ukrainian MP and deputy chair of Zelensky's Servant of the People party. Welcome to The Times at 1, Yevgenia. Do you think there should be elections now?
Elections should be after the end of the war, because martial law is not something that happens because, just parliament votes for it. It has reasons behind it. We are, unfortunately, and I would love, as the member of parliament, to say that, we have, we'll hold elections soon, because it will mean that the hard phase of the war is over. But we're not. I don't know if you're following, but just, yesterday we had air alarm and attacks of rocket drones 8 times per day in Kyiv. 10 people were killed in Kharkiv region. Today, 4 people were killed in a bus in Kherson. Well, Kherson is totally, like a human safari. That Russian forces are doing with FPV drones, which are, small drones that carry explosives. And again, we've discussed that in the parliament numerous times. We even created a special working group. I'm part of it. And we have been discussing what has to be changed in the legislation, what criteria should be there. So the elections should be fair, well organized, because it's not just the day of the vote. Elections is a process, is a campaigning. How would you campaign somewhere in in Donetsk region, near the
listen, of course, it's so difficult to imagine how elections can be held, but there are points being raised by Mykhailo Fedorov in terms of that phrase that I used, that democracy in Ukraine cannot be held hostage by this war, that the levels of corruption in Ukraine, he says, are one of the things that's hurting the country's war effort. Is that mounting pressure on at least setting a timeline for elections to be laid out, and for Zelensky to be more open to the idea of it?
Again, it's when you say Zelensky being open to it, Zelensky is not, close to the idea of elections. He doesn't want to be like Putin, like Lukashenko, God forbid.
Yeah, but the longer it goes on without it, is there a risk of that happening?
Again, I'm in the office. I'll be in the office on 29th of August for 7 years. I believe British Parliament didn't have elections during the Second World War. And we are comparing the war that Russia wages on Ukraine as the biggest conflict on this continent after the Second World War. I'm open, of course, to democratic process, to elections, but as a member of parliament who understands what has to be done to organize the process, and I don't even mention the constitution. It is forbidden in the constitution to have the elections during the martial law. But I'm thinking on the what has to be done. 50% of Ukrainians are displaced. 29% displaced in Ukraine, so they're not registered as the
yes,
where they voted before. Other 20% are abroad. Millions of people is in the army. How would they participate, vote, or be a candidate? Obviously, there will be a high demand on having veterans of the war, both in the parliament and local government, maybe run for the president. Of course.
Well, let me ask
again.
Let me ask you about Fedorov. I mean, how do you view this intervention? Is he looking for a way back into government? I mean, should he have been sacked as a defence minister?
Well, I was surprised by this video and him aiming that elections is sort of like the magic pill. And again, in this video, he says that we need to find a legal, safe way to organize the elections. But again, when he was Minister of Defense, the Ministry of Defense was asked to enter the working group and say and give their proposals how the acting military would participate. We didn't have any response and any practical steps from Minister of Defense. When he was a Minister of Digital Transformation, obviously he could, done something for election registry or something, but we didn't see that effort. And again, I've been with Mykhailo since day one in the team. I know him well. I'm really thankful for what he's done as a Minister of Digital Transformation, and then on his other position. But yes. I'm puzzled. I'm definitely puzzled by this approach. And as I was monitoring social media, and I didn't see too much of approval. Most of the NGOs, especially those who know what election process is, say that it is a very dangerous idea.
All right. Listen, Yevgenia Kravchuk, thank you very much for talking to us, Ukrainian MP and Deputy Chair of Zelensky's Servant of the People Party.